Dear learners, welcome back to SWAYAM NPTEL course on library automation and networking. So this is week number 1, module number 1, library automation. Lecture number is 4, and the title of this particular lecture is library automation steps and advantages. Dear learners, we have learned much about library automations, its historical aspects, definitions, generations, growth and development in the international scenario as well as in Indian scenario. So in this particular session, we will be discussing more about what are the steps which are required when you are planning for a library automation. And also, when you do such kind of an automation, what are your advantages? Is there any benefit when you are going for an automation process? And what are the challenges or what are the issues which are involved, so that if you make a good planning or action plan, so the automation process can be easily done without much issues. Dear learners, we will be discussing more about steps in library automation and also the advantages of library automation. As we know that the automation has been made a revolutionary change, the way in which libraries have been performing their activities and services. The efficiency, authenticity, reliability, and also the working operations, so the operational efficiencies has been considerably changed once the automation has been introduced in libraries. So when we look at in the present scenario, so when you talk about library automation, it is not something like you are taking a privilege. It is not that automation is a kind of a privilege. So it is a kind of necessity. It is a mandatory thing that, or a compulsory activity that you need to automate your libraries, because it has considerably saved the timings of you as well as the users. So library staff can use such kind of a saved time for any kind of a constructive services or activities that can be performed in the libraries. So lot of clerical, or we can say that lot of laborious jobs or repetitive in nature job that can be performed using a library automation process. So we should be carefully planned in such a way that how a particular automation can be performed in a particular library, so that you will be successful in making such kind of an automation in your library. So when you plan in such a way that it is not that you are planning only on the softwares in which you are going to buy. So there are many areas we need to consider. As we talk about libraries, the first and foremost thing is we need to consider about the staff as well as users. That means the manpower is very much important, and the funding like money or finance, what we call it as, that is also important aspects. And apart from that, how much collection you have and what is the impact if you do an automation. So you should have a complete study about your existing collection, existing users, existing manpower as well as existing infrastructure and funding. So unless until you make a clear idea, a groundwork regarding your library and its present situation in terms of its man, machinery, collections and the infrastructure, so you will not be able to plan accordingly. So in order to make a good plan, you should have a prior knowledge about the library's activities or the previous scenario in which how the library is working and how the users are coordinating with the library systems. So when we talk about steps in libraries, as we have seen that any steps or any activity you perform, planning is very much important. So planning is the first step in library automation. So where to plan or how to plan or what are the things to be planned. So when we talk about planning in such a way, the planning, as we have seen that the planning should be in terms of manpower, that means the library staff, how many library staff are available for performing a particular library automation activity, and what could be the effect if they devote such kind of a job to that particular staff, and what could be the normal procedure to perform such kind of an activities, and apart from that about the users, how it will affect the users in terms of services, activities and their regular movement, etc. So this should be completely planned. So planning is very crucial part of library automation. So when we look at the scenario, you are planning something in your library, that means you are going for an automation. You planned in such a way that okay, we will do this automation, you will consider the present scenario. But not only the present scenario, even the future scenario or situation which is going to come also need to be identified, or that also has to be part of planning process when you go for a library automation process. So automation plan should always consider, apart from the manpower, the software parts, hardware in which you are going to use, infrastructure, 4 M's such as money, manpower, materials and machines. So these are all the 4 M's we normally call it in terms of library and information science, which are also equally need to be considered while planning as a first step of library automation process. And apart from that, when you are talking about hardware and software and the technologies, the obsoleteness of technologies or the updateness, advancement of technologies, compatibility of softwares you are using, hardware you are using. So altogether you should have a clear idea about what you are going to plan for the present as well as the future. And also when you talk about hardware and software, in terms of activities or in terms of services you are providing, say for example you are automating a library for your circulation services. So you should have a clear idea about or a plan about where you are going to introduce this automation. That means in a circulation counter. That means circulation counter has lot of activities and services. So how this particular automation, when you introduce, it is going to affect a particular user as well as staff. Because there were 10 staff in the circulation counter, after installation of your automation, only 5 or 4 are present. So the remaining staff have to be provided some kind of other jobs. So that should be planned. And also if you go in such a way that how the users will be able to use such kind of a facility or services, and how they affect because of such kind of a advancements or such kind of a modification in the circulation counter, all these things should be equally planned, and they should be clearly should have some kind of an action plan, so that the first step of library automation has been completed. And again, when you are talking about automation in the planning mode, so the planning means you are going to perform automation or you are going to introduce automation in your libraries. So who will do that? Normally we will say that if you have enough manpower and the skilled staff, you yourself will do. So that we call it as in-house operation, or in-house you are performing the library automation. If there are libraries, if they have fund but they are not able to have enough number of skilled manpower, then such kind of activities have to be outsourced. So you should plan in such a way that whether you will go for library automation in the first step of planning as outsource or in-house. So whether you will do it internally or will you outsource such kind of an activities to a external agency. So this has to be planned accordingly. And when we talk about automation softwares and hardwares, the cost of hardwares and what kind of material you need to purchase, because the same item can be in a different quality. So which one you should purchase and from whom you should purchase, and how long the sustainability of that particular material will be there. And when we talk about software, which software you will buy, because you have open source software, commercial software, in-house developed software, there are software which are developed by individuals, customized software. So there are many softwares, and even softwares are service. So which could be your part of plan to have such kind of a automation process. So that should be clearly planned in the first step itself. So regarding all the materials and all the machines and all the manpower and how you are going to perform such activities need to be planned in a well manner, so that your planning will be good and your implementation also will be error free. So then once you planned everything, that means you have made a complete plan about the activities and the operations which are going to perform, majorly about man, machines and the collection, and you have evaluated the present collection and you have evaluated the users also, and you had identified that how it is going to affect the users as well as the staff. And once it is decided, the planning has been completed, now the choice of hardware as well as software and its peripherals. So when we talk about software and hardware parts, as we know that these are two major components. One is a physical part, the other one is a performing or task operations part, where set of programs or the instructions given to a computer to perform a particular task. So that we call it as software, where the machines or the physical objects which we are using to perform the activities of a software, we call it as hardware. So hardware and the peripherals as well as the software in which you are going to either purchase or you are going to take from someone else, all these need to be clearly identified in the second stage, where you are going to select a hardware as well as software. So when you look at the hardware and peripheral parts, as we know that there are many machines or materials which are required for supporting your activities. So for example, you need keyboard, printers, output devices, input devices and all other machines, etc. So for that, how do we plan accordingly to make such kind of a step-by-step plan, so that you will not be reducing the challenges before purchasing such kind of an items. So always suitability we need to check whether it is suitable or compatible with the software in which you are going to purchase or software you already purchased, or whether it is meeting the library's requirement. That means you can't go for an advanced level in the beginning itself. So you need to start by step. So in the beginning, so what are the things you are going to make? So basic operations, whether this will be able to maintain, that need to be identified in the initial stage of selection of a hardware and peripherals. And also apart from that, the specification of hardware and the other supporting materials, or we call it as peripherals, also need to be identified as well as evaluated. And specification can be decided based on the availability of budget. So the funding also, the source of funding, because there should be a gradual funding also to improve your systems. So that also need to be planned accordingly, which are related to hardware parts. And apart from that, when you talk about hardware, storage mediums, so the capacity of storage, so for that you should have some kind of a plan that how much data you will be acquiring now and what will be the growth of the data in the future. So considering the present scenario as well as the future scenario, you should be able to make such kind of a storage devices, planning to buy such kind of a hardware and peripherals also. And what could be the usage of that particular machine, or the data in which it has to be loaded. So these also need to be calculated. And also suppose if you are going for a new version of a particular software, so whether it will be compatible or it can be upgraded with the present hardware we are using, so that also need to be planned. So everything in the case of hardware and peripherals need to be identified and evaluated properly to meet the present as well as future requirements. And apart from that, one of the major issues or challenges faced by library professionals or even anyone which is dealing with a hardware is its maintenance. So annual maintenance cost, or the service providers, or whether we are getting a proper servicing for that, do they serve properly, or do they have annual maintenance services, how much is the cost of AMC. So all these need to be calculated, and accordingly the funding source also need to be identified. And along with the AMC, the warranty period, sometimes we get warranty period for some kind of a materials or machines for a few years, so that also need to be confirmed how long we can have such kind of a services without having AMC, etc. So once the hardware and peripheral part is completed, now this next stage is software parts. As we know that when you are talking about library automation softwares are very much important. Softwares are set of instructions given to a computer to perform a particular task. So in case of automation, as we know that we provide such kind of activities and services in terms of library housekeeping operations. That means you will be majorly going to automate your library housekeeping operations. So what are the requirements in such a way that you are going to provide the services to the users? And sometimes people will prefer software to provide only the circulation service, and sometimes the complete housekeeping operations. So you need to decide what kind of software you are going to make for what kind of services and activities in the initial stage itself. As we know that library automation involves huge investment of money, manpower, energy, as well as users' time. So considering all these things, so you should be able to plan in a perfect manner which software you will buy, because there are many softwares, there are many cases or many challenges associated with software. Some softwares will be developed and then they will stop the development. Some softwares will not have updates later. Some softwares will not be having supporting systems where you will not have any kind of vendors or suppliers, and sometimes even if they have vendors, suppliers, you will not have any kind of mechanism to customize it. And sometimes problems like open source and commercial software where the source code will be available, or without source code, where without source code you always need to depend someone else, and for that you need to pay extra. So all these scenario, even including the compatibility of the software, updateness of software, and the usage of software, all functionalities and functions which are available in this particular software, all need to be planned in a perfect manner. Otherwise the problem, as we have discussed, that it is for a sustainable, and this is for a long duration. That means whatever you hold now or whatever you are going to purchase now should have a proper sustainability. So then only you will be able to make utilization of such kind of a software as well as hardware. So in case of softwares, the major steps which are required, what kind of software you are going to select. There are many softwares like commercial software or proprietary software, or we call it as closed software, open source software, free or open source software, or open source integrated library systems, or open source integrated library management systems, etc. And there are categories like softwares which are developed by individuals, and there are software which are having integrated or only single functional. And sometimes we can categorize softwares are softwares developed by or indigenous software or developed by the own country, or softwares which are highly used in the foreign countries of origin. So these are all different categories of softwares. So n number of functionalities, n number of characteristics or points need to be identified and evaluated properly before you select any kind of a software. So ultimately, careful planning about a particular software as well as its functionalities, capabilities, and apart from that, what are the requirements you have, and what are your plans to provide the services to the users, and what are the areas in which you are going to make the automation process. So a complete scenario need to be identified, and you should have a proper groundwork on that. Then only you will be able to proceed with the software selection as well as its implementation. So there are many more points related to the library software selection. If you are not able to select a proper software, you can consult other libraries or other librarians, and as well as the expert in that particular field, and you need to check how the service of that particular person. Suppose there are cases like single software will be supplied by many agencies, and which agency's service is good, this has to be evaluated. General features of the softwares have to be evaluated, its compatibility, its installation procedures, availability of documentation, how complex it is to install and how complex it is to download and install, and what are the supporting systems which are required for this, and what are the supporting softwares required for the installation of the software, how this can be worked like internal or as well as the multidimensional. So what are the additional features, what are the additional services provided, how do we customize, how the easiness of customization. So each and everything should be clearly planned in such a way that you are going to make any kind of a selection in the software part. And apart from that, there are some set of common points like effectiveness of the software, reliability of the software, expandability of the software. Say for example, if you buy a particular software and you know that only one person is dealing with that software, and sometimes after purchasing and you are providing all the funding for them and you are getting that particular software, after some times this particular person is vanishing from the scene. So you don't have anyone to consult with the problems associated with that software, and nobody will be there to help you. So all your work, because considerable amount of work, energy and time as well as money have been spent on this particular procedure, so all things will go waste. So before that, the reliability of the software, reliability of the service providers, and how it is compatible with the existing system as well as the emerging systems. So this also need to be evaluated in terms of its effectiveness. And also the cost part is another important thing that also need to be keep it in mind, that how much we need to pay for the purchase as well as how much we need to pay for annual maintenance fees also. We need to evaluate the amount in which you are paying, whether it is worth paying for that particular software, whether it has all the functionalities and capabilities also, that also need to be evaluated properly. And apart from that, security system, how secure the data in which it is feeded in that particular software, how the safety measures they are made in that particular software, and how compatible with the security and safety measures as well as upgradations also. And there are things which are related to pre-installation as well as post-installation, and how the maintenance can be done after installation, and also the cost associated with that after installation. And there are value added services. Suppose as a person who purchased a software, you install it properly and all things have been done properly, and after that you feel that one more module or one more facility has to be introduced, or that has to be customized in the existing software. So how do we do that? Whether if a person is agree for that, is there any such provision in the system or the software where the customization can be incorporated? So that all things need to be evaluated prior to install and go for a particular selection of a software itself. So there are many softwares in both the categories like open source and commercial softwares. Koha, NewGenLib, ABCD, these are all the softwares which comes under integrated library system in the open source category. And also leading commercial softwares like Lipsys or Slim, Sol, etc. So these are all part of commercial softwares, and some softwares are free softwares where the difference between free and open source software is the availability of source code, where when we talk about open source software, the source code of the software is available free of cost. That means you can make a customization, you can redistribute, you can modify it, you can do anything with the source code. But free software, the software is available for free of cost. That means you don't need to pay anything for its downloading or installing or getting the software. But for doing any kind of customization, you will not be provided the source code. For that, you need to depend the developer or the agency in which those who are dealing with that. So remember that there is a category of free as well as open source software and also commercial software. So any of the software, looking at their present scenario, how people are using that and how well established their systems and what are the capabilities and functional modules they have, and apart from that, what about the documentations available and also the customers in which already using and their services, all these things need to be considered as a factor for selecting a particular software for library automation. As we know that when you automate a particular library, because of that we are getting many other additional services part of the automation. Say for example, you manually keep circulation. So once you perform the automation in the circulation process, all your things will be automated, like transaction procedures like issue, return, renewal, and purchasing a particular material and getting a particular request from the users through online. And there are many other advantages like reports, statistics, and how many books have been issued a particular days. So these all scenario, all reports, statistics and the calculations can be done, and you will be able to find out where are the weaknesses and where are the strengths in your particular area of automation system in which you have already done. So all these things need to be part of the automation procedures. So you need to have some kind of a priority in that way. What are the services you are going to provide? Say for example, you can provide current awareness services after doing library automation, selective dissemination of information, and your OPAC can be changed to web OPAC, access to databases, electronic resources, electronic books, thesis and dissertations. So all such kind of additional services can be provided. So when you plan something for library automation as a part of automation system, you need to plan accordingly. So you will think about software as well as hardware, and what are the additional services which can be provided to the users that also need to be prioritized. And the other major important area is staff training. As we have seen that we are going to purchase a particular automation software, but how far your library staff is familiar with that software. So for that we need to have some kind of a training program. So staff should be skilled and staff should be trained in that way in which they can use or perform the activities and services using the software. So after or before the selection of the software itself, users have to have a clear idea about whom will be dealing with this particular software and how do we provide such kind of a training program and what are the methods of trainings and to whom the method and to whom this training program will be given. So all such things should be very clear. That is part of staff training. So staff training normally different from different softwares. The software in which you have selected, say for example, when you are selecting open source software or commercial software, there is a difference between the format in which you are going to provide the training. Because when you plan to give a training program for your own staff for a commercial software, normally the staff who are dealing with the commercial software will be coming to you and giving the training program for them. But when you choose a open source software, we will get a support for the training program. So there are many volunteers, there are many groups, there are many communities in which you can get a response for your queries, but ultimately you need to provide such kind of a training for sending such kind of a staff to have some kind of a training which is organized by some other institute. So you need to see the nature of software in which you are going to select, and accordingly you need to plan the training programs. The other step is user orientation. As we know that users also need to be equally known about the softwares which you are using, and what are the facilities available in that software for them, and what are the services on behalf of users you are providing through this particular software. So even the training for users also very much important, because they should be very much familiar with the activities, services which are going to get through this particular automation process. So it is not only the software selection, or you are planning a proper services, additional services, and apart from that you have to provide proper services or the training program, or make them aware about the activities and services, and you have to provide some kind of a sensitization program to the users, so they will be very much familiar about the activities and their entitlements. So these are all the different steps which need to be followed in the library automation process. Now dear learners, let us look into the advantages of library automation. As we have seen that once you plan, and even the softwares, hardware parts and user training as well as staff training, so your major part has been completed. So now let us think about, once you go for all these intensive activities and you perform a library automation, so what are the advantages you are going to get as a library? And these advantages can be changed from one library to other library based on the nature of library, category of library, or the collection in which they have, users in which they have. But ultimately there are some common advantages which are part of library automation, such as it largely reduces the paperwork or manual work or repetitive work, or we can say that some kind of an administrative and clerical work of your staff can be drastically reduced, so that the saved work or the saved staff can be utilized for providing some other constructive services. It also improves the accuracy, because the error will be diminished and the error will be drastically reduced. So that will be an added advantage for library automation, where the accuracy, reliability, and also the kind of exhaustiveness of data, and in terms of library automation, it improves the accuracy as well as effectiveness of the operations. It enhances the user's satisfaction as well as conveniences. It also facilitates sharing and exchanging of information. And automation will help you to create digital libraries as well as online catalogs, and providing bibliographical details, resource sharing, networking system, etc. The efficiency of the operations, the complete operational activities of a particular library will be efficient if you use automation. It drastically reduces the time which is allotted for manual tasks which are performed by the library staff. And it also provides seamless opportunities for library staff as well as librarian to integrate the other advanced technologies. So you will be witnessing so many technologies are coming in the advanced stages, and that can be implemented once you start, because the library automation is one of the basic steps which require for or any kind of additional services or integrating with the modern services. So sometimes we feel that the cost effectiveness, that means when you start library automation, when you plan, you have to plan everything and the initial cost will be very high. When you look at the long run, the library automation will be always cost effective. And it will facilitate accessibility, that means the users can access digital resources as well as electronic resources, and it enables the access even within the campus as well as remote access. So it is very much convenient for users to have such kind of a resource even from outside the libraries. It also empowers users, because when you introduce technologies like barcoding technologies or RFID technologies, users have their own privileges. They can come to the library without depending on the staff. They can perform their own activities like self-checkouts, renewal, or paying the amount, all these things, overdues, etc. So this can be performed as their own, so that will improve their efficiency and as well as confidence. And also when you look at the search and retrieval part, so once you go for automation, it increases the searchability as well as retrievability of any kind of information which is available in your library. And apart from this, as we know that when we use some kind of an automation software, the organization of the content, organization of your collection, and organization of your services and the effectiveness of your activities will be highly enhanced. It can considerably save the space in which a particular library is having, because as we know that in a traditional environment, keeping book catalog, or we call it as catalog itself, will take a huge space. So a large number of space, a high volume space can be saved when you go for library automation. So it is a kind of a space saving mechanism when you go for library automation. And apart from that, you will be having an uninterrupted access for the electronic resources. That means you will be having an access 24/7 after making an automation process in the libraries. And as we know that resource sharing, cooperation, coordinations, networking, all these can be part of library automation. So it makes the sharing of resources very fast as well as easy. And even the other side is customization. Users may have different perspectives and users may ask different types of questions. They may have different requirements, different demands. So up to some extent, library automation can help in such a way that to support the user queries and demands which are keep on changing time to time. So dear learners, let me conclude with this. As we have seen what are the different steps which are part of planning for a library automation. So when you are going for a automation, so what are the steps need to be considered or evaluated? As we have seen that it is not only the present scenario in which you need to consider even the future scenario also before you go for library automation. And we have seen that there are many advantages for library automation. It can give a complete satisfaction for the users as well as the library staff, and it can considerably enhance its efficiency as well as operational activities. Dear learners, with this, I hope that you have had a clear idea about what are the steps to be followed while going for library automation, as well as what are the advantages which are part of library automation. So once you have properly planned and properly selected your hardware, software, and user training and staff training programs, then you will be able to make your library automation in an effective and efficient manner so that users will be satisfied and you will be making your staff will be satisfied, and also your library as well as organization will be getting recognition. Thank you.